Be still, my soul, for God is on your side. Bear patiently the cross of grief or pain. Leave to your God the order and provide. In every change, God faithful will remain. Be still, my soul, your best eternal friend. Through thorny ways leads to a joyful end. Be still, my soul, for God will undertake to guide the future days as in the past. Your hope, your confidence shake. All now mysterious shall be clear at last. Be still, my soul, the waves and winds to know how Jesus' power ruled them long ago. Be still, my soul, the hour will soon be here, when we shall be with God whom we adore. Your disappointed God, no grief, no fear, sorrow replaced with joy forevermore. Be still, my soul, when change and tears are past. All safe and blessed, we shall meet at last. Sorry. Technical difficulties. Go ahead. Okay. Preached in little tiny country churches in Wisconsin. I had one church that had about 10 members that would come out to church, and it was very interesting. So Jesus and his disciples sat down for a Q&A, and Peter asked Jesus, and I paraphrase, Jesus, you talk a lot about forgiveness, but how many times do I really have to forgive somebody? 7? And I can imagine Jesus turning his head toward Peter and shaking his head and saying, no, Peter, not 7. 77 times. Now, in biblical number code, that means forever. Peter's mouth must have just dropped to the floor when he heard this. And he must have thought, how can I do that? How can I forgive that much? To forgive and to be forgotten is one of the basic needs of our spiritual life. There are times in our lives when we have done things that we know are not pleasing to God, or anyone else, whether the deeds are small or whether they're devastating. And we wonder, how in the world can I be forgiven? We also want another question that we ask ourselves is, how can I ever be redeemed? To forgive ourselves and to forgive one another, although a basic theological principle in Christianity, is a concept that gives us problems. This is why the psalm which we read this morning is very important to us. Because in Psalm 103, the person has already been forgiven. It is a psalm that is a favorite of many of us because it reminds us that yes, there is salvation. Yes, there is a God who loves us more than we know. Yes, this God would rather forgive than punish us for the things that we have done wrong. It is a radical idea. It's an idea that is so far-fetched that we aren't able to believe it. But it's true. At the very core of Psalm 103 is the concept of the steadfast love of God. Verse 8 says, Yahweh, which means God, is merciful and forgiving, slow to anger, and rich in love. Or, as another translation puts it, abounding in steadfast love. Now, this word for steadfast love in Hebrews is hesed. And John May, the author of Psalms in the Interpretation series, explains, to do hesed is to do the best in and make the most of a relationship. The Lord's steadfast love, says the psalm, is so it is as great as the heavens are high above the earth, and it is as everlasting as everlasting lasts. The psalmist is so overwhelmed with the forgiveness given by God that it is proclaimed, bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless God's holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and do not forget God's benefits. So because we are forgiven, we must also forgive others. Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He also said, you must forgive others as God has forgiven you. Now, many people cannot fathom in the world, can we forgive all people? What about the people who display truly evil tendencies, like serial killers? The ones who seem to have no conscience at all. To put it a little closer range to our own lives, how do we forgive that neighbor who constantly gossips about you and tells lies about you? Or your best friend who suddenly turns on you and tells everyone all the secrets that you ever told him? The secrets that you pinky swore to never tell anyone. Or the people who broke into your house and stole all of your memories by taking precious gifts given to you by your husband, your mother, your father, your children. Irreplaceable items. How can you forgive those who shoot people down in the streets? Or the racists who mistreat those who are different from them? If they are forgiven, aren't they given a pass? No punishment? No justice? But we must realize that forgiveness is not the same as justice. 400 years of torture, murder, ignoring their poverty, their humanity, their inability to move forward and become productive people in society, to be equals to all, to be able to live a life of freedom and prosperity as promised, these things cannot be wiped away by just an apology. You cannot undo the damage that has been done by your lies, your cheating, your greed, your lack of concern for others, your disrespect for the lives of others, no matter their sexual orientation, the color of their skin, their status, or their beliefs. There has to be a reckoning. Now, Jesus understood that, and so did God. When the Israelites turned against Yahweh in the desert after they had been saved from the Egyptians, they were punished. When they turned their back on God and built a golden calf to worship, Yahweh became very angry and killed those responsible for leading people astray. And when they continued to rebel against God because of the fake news brought back to them by the spies who went into the promised land, the news that there were giants in the land, plus their fear of new things and other cultures, they refused to enter the promised land. God became very angry because time and again they did not obey. Moses had intervened every time and convinced God not to destroy the people that God had chosen. And this time, Moses won on the people and their generations afterwards. I can imagine that conversation, and I can imagine it wasn't very comfortable. God appeared before Moses and the people, and God was very angry, and the people cowered. God says, Moses, what happened? Why can't you control these people? I'm sorry, God. Those spies came back and gave fake news. They said there were giants in the land who consume people. Well, that's ridiculous. What is wrong with them? After all I have done for these people, do you know how many times I have forgiven them for their disobedience and complaints? I'm done. I am done. I'm going to destroy them, all down to the third and the fourth generations. Now, God, don't be rash. Remember your promise. Remember your covenant. I'll be your God, and you will be my people. You have a reputation. Yahweh, God, is merciful and forgiving, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, forgiving iniquity and transgression. Know that. What will they think? The Egyptians will tell everybody how weak you are. You can't turn your back on them now. Okay, do this. Punish those who have not believed, but don't come down on generations of children who are innocent. God sighs. Okay, but this is what's going to happen. I will forgive them, but none of them are going to go into that promised land. They are going to have to wander around the desert for 40 years until every last one of them is dead. And the children will be spared and will grow up and become my obedient people, and they shall enter into the land that I have promised them. Wow. Even God has to be talked down sometimes. So wrongdoing has its consequences, and there are actions that we must take beyond just saying, I'm sorry. But you can, and you can go forward. You can change your ways. You can mend those relationships with your friends and neighbors. You can start changing the world. You can build a better society where all are equal and invited to the table. Support programs and benefit others, good jobs, good health insurance, A wage that isn't just a living wage, but a wage where people can enjoy the fruits of their labor like their bosses do. Imagine that. Believing that we all have to be responsible for what has happened and to fix it. Stop the hate, stop the lies, stop the greed, and take care of humanity. Through these acts, you can be redeemed. You can restore yourself and become a better person. And that is your redemption. You may be punished, but you can be redeemed. Through making amends, changing your thought patterns, the way you think about other people, against a society and the systems that have produced exclusion, systems that continue to leave people out of being able to move forward to have a better life. We must come together to develop strategies, including teaching people about the causes of why these things have happened and why it is wrong. The psalm continues, as tenderly as parents treat their children, so Yahweh has compassion on those who fear God. The theologian Walter Brueggemann says, God uses the generosity and concern of a caring parent. We are surprised because we expect God to judge according to calculating human standards, but these are not God's ways. I'm reminded of a time when I was just a young adult, just graduated from college, didn't have a lot of money, and I started my first job but didn't have a car. And my parents had just bought this nice, beautiful green Volkswagen. That was I call the car for the young people in those days. And I was able to drive it to work, and I would drop my mother off to work, and then I would go to work. So one day when I went to get my mother, I was a little upset because something happened at work, and I started crying. And she said, why don't we go over here to the cemetery? People won't worry about why you're crying there. So as we were sitting there and I was trying to compose myself, a car came along, and I had to back the car up so they could get by. And I hit the car on a tree and bent the left fender. Now I really had something. You know, he was a very kind man, he really was. But he had a little bit of a temper. And sometimes when we would do something wrong, you know, he would get angry. But sometimes even the tiniest little thing might get him angry. So I wasn't quite sure how he was going to handle this. So when I got home, brave little me went up to my father and said, this is what I did. And I braced myself. And when I finished, he calmly said, well, at least nobody got hurt, and that's what's most important. And he walked away. And I stood there with my mouth open. Those who need forgiveness for wrong, sins, if you will, can find a loving, faithful God, a God that will not stay angry forever or expect justice as swiftly or as cruelly as we might expect. God first loves us and hopes in us and remains faithful to the covenant that has been given us through our ancestors long, long ago. But in Leviticus, it is recorded, and the Hebrews repeated it, God says, I will establish a new covenant. I will put my laws in their minds and write them in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall not teach one another to say to each other, know God, for they shall know me. From the least of them to the greatest, for I will be merciful toward their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. And that new covenant is Jesus. Us a better way. The teachings of Jesus was taught us to love one another and to love God as we love ourselves. And he also said, Whenever you are praying, and wherever you are praying, so this refers to you people out there in Zoom, first, forgive those or someone who you have done wrong to, and then pray so that God may forgive you as well. In that act of letting go of your pain and sorrow, your rage and your hatred, it allows you to receive the consequences of your action is to move you toward redemption. In that act of accepting responsibility for what you have, it allows you to be free to begin making changes in your ideas and your attitudes and your ability to love. Love others, love yourself, and love God. Moving forward towards action, making changes, helps you become a new person with a new life. And that is when you can be redeemed. Bless Yahweh, O my soul, and let all the people say, Amen.